Welcome to the very first episode or part of this series of the MindLock MASTR Series. Again, so this quick kind of introduction, this isn't really going to be about me at all. This is about bringing as much value that we can to Team MindLock, all the athletes that we have. For me, working with athletes every single day, there's a lot that we work through. And there's a lot of stuff that, we'll talk about that isn't really my area of expertise, whether it's nutrition, whether it's finance. These things come up. So I thought, what better idea than to bring in some people that are specialists in their field and give you a chance to talk to them live. So today on the very first series, we're going to focus on finance, and we've got Chris Hanna, your money guy. So Chris, first of all, thanks so much for coming on. Let everybody know too, just a quick rundown as to who you are, how you got into this stuff. I know I saw one of your posts that got my attention. It was a really cool, kind of entertaining video breaking down like a UFC fighter's salary and what that actually looks like once you take everything away from it. And I thought it was, informational, but also entertaining too. So, let everybody know where you come from, how things work, how you got into this, and I'll get into some questions that some of our athletes sent into you.
Sure. So I'm your money guy. I help you make smart decisions with your money. Several years ago, I recognized that most of the traditional financial advice around managing money was terrible. That the classic budget that asks you to track every single thing you spend your money on and try and do that for the rest of your life just didn't make any sense. So several years ago, I started managing my money in a way that made a lot more sense to me, using a few key bank accounts, some of the dashboard templates that you may have seen, Dylan, that I shared. And now, or several years ago as well, after I was doing that successfully for myself, I started helping other people do it. And when I wanted to turn it into a business, I thought to myself, who is a great group of people to start with? And I landed on UFC fighters, just having been a fan of the UFC for a long time and recognizing the fact that they have some of the most chaotic income that you can imagine amongst almost any profession. Fighting maybe 1, 2, 3 times a year, earning easily 6 figures per fight, or half of that or double that, depending on if they win or lose. Maybe something, they get injured or their opponent gets injured. There's just so much chaos in there. And so that's what I specialize in is helping not just fighters today, but business owners, anyone who is a high earner with some sort of complicated financial situation, helping them really simplify it, get organized, build some structure into their life so that they know exactly where their money's going, what they need to do with it, and they just wake up not having to worry about money.
Yeah. I think that's a big one too, is the worry part. And also when it comes to fighting, I think the misconception, I mean, for me, starting as a fan too of fighting, I think you assume, once you get into the UFC, if you're a fighter, you've made it, that's it, that's the life. And, firsthand, I learned too from working with UFC fighters, that's rarely the case, unless sometimes you're part of like the top 5, top 10, maybe, then you can take some of the stress out of things, but it really isn't one of those like, magic things where you sign the contract and now you're set. Is that something you noticed too from working with a lot of not just fighters, but like really high level fighters, is that they're still struggling with, very similar finance issues that everybody else does?
Yeah, I mean, nothing fundamentally changes in the way that you manage money just because your income changes. In fact, it's your mistakes are just magnified. So, you make a mistake earning a regular biweekly paycheck, then it's no big problem. I mean, assuming you're not taking on some sort of massive debt, but just a regular mistake is going to be corrected when you receive your next paycheck in a couple of weeks. For fighters who oftentimes, whether you're a beginner or you've been doing it for several years, unless you've like really sat down and asked yourself, and considered how to be smart with your money, like it's not just going to magically happen. And so, yeah, for sure. And then the mistakes are magnified. So you make a mistake mismanaging a fight and you might not get another income for another 6 months or longer, depending on some of the things that we talked about that might happen. So it's something that you have to consciously make a decision and just say, you are going to be smart with your money.
Yeah. I think it's a good point. I think it's a big misconception in anything at any level is like, I'll clean up my act once I get there, like
Mhm.
once that's demanded of me, it's not just money, and it's things like nutrition, like I'll really start to dial in on my nutrition when I get to that level, or mindset, I'll really dial in on that, working on my mindset, when I get to that level that it's required. And like you were saying, these are just habits, and the higher you get, the more vulnerable you become now, because we're dealing with more, and there's more pressures, and there's more stresses. And if you didn't build that base early on, it doesn't matter what that fight check or what that game check is. If you don't have good habits, it's going to go away. I mean, you hear all these stories about NFL players and NBA players who still live paycheck to paycheck, and you're like, how is that possible? It's because the habits weren't set in advance, right? So, for you, coming at this from your level of experience, what's the importance of being proactive, and what are some of those early mistakes you see on, like you said, no matter how big or small your paycheck is, if you're making mistakes, you're making mistakes. I guess it's a two-part question. Number one, what are some of the most common mistakes people make that you see? And number two is, because of that, why is it so important to be proactive now, so that by the time, your income does double, triple, quadruple, you're in a much better place because of it?
So there are the mistakes. There's sort of like the actual mistakes that people make, but there's this mindset where you think you're just not making enough. And that might be the case. But when you think that way, you assume that you're not making enough. And so therefore, you don't really need to manage your money, because you think there's not going to be much left over. And so, especially for, let's say, new fighters who are earning next to nothing, especially if they lose their fight, they think, I'll pay my managers and coaches and I'll just do what I can, scrap, and hope I make it to the next one. The truth is, kind of like you were saying, when you implement habits and start building on them, they compound and you get better over time. But back to mistakes, I mean, mistake number one is just not strategically managing your money. Which, what all I mean when I say that is looking at a number on a screen or on a piece of paper and saying, this is exactly how you're going to use it over the next 3, 6, 12 months, whatever it might be. Even if 90% has to go to your living expenses, or 95%, actually writing it down and making sure that there's not a couple $100 here or there that you're just throwing out the window because you think you're not making enough to manage. So I'd say early on, that's one of the biggest mistakes. And then as you continue to grow, thinking that that money is going to keep coming somehow. And so you're more likely, as you're earning more that you have never had before, just, it could be blowing it, but it could also just be, I deserve this. I'm going to fight again. I'm starting to make some more money. I can spend a little bit more on this. And again, that might be true. You need to look at the numbers, but I wouldn't be lackadaisical with it. Don't just think that that it's just going to keep coming. I mean, this is just such an unpredictable industry. You never know what's going to happen.
Hmm. Yeah. How important is tracking? Because you referenced that too, and at least for me, that seems like one of the. It seems like one of the, I guess, the first and easiest steps, I guess, before you have to overcommit into certain things. I'm sure a lot of people don't even keep track of what's coming in, what's going out, just assuming that, like, hey, I'm okay right now. Again, I'll kind of do that stuff later. Do you find that that's typically like one of the first steps that you recommend, is like keep track of what's going on, allocate money one way or another, even if it's not perfect? Like, just start to have a visual of what's going on, because if you can't see it, you can't act on it.
Yeah, it's important to clarify what we mean by tracking. When most people think about tracking, they think about doing something like regularly. I mean, tracking expenses is one of the most common first pieces of advice that people like to give in the financial space. Is they say you need to know where your money's going, so therefore track your expenses. You do want to know where your money's going, but you don't have to track your expenses. But you are also saying just seeing stuff in front of you. That's a bit different. We might use the term just like putting the numbers down once and then just updating them as they change. So, for example, in my, you can download, I call it a financial dashboard. I've got one for free on my website where it has templates for the 5 key areas of your finances: your income, your expenses, your assets, which are things you own, like your bank and investment accounts, your liabilities, like any sort of debts that you have, and your goals. So those 5 are it's the overview of your finances that if you just record it once, uh, and all you need to do is just update it sort of as they change. That is absolutely step one is just knowing where you stand financially. In the same way that if you go to the doctor, the nurse is, before the doctor comes in to check on you, nurse is going to take your heart rate, your blood pressure, your breathing rate. There's just these vitals of your health, and you need to do the same thing with your finances.
Yeah, it's a good point. No, I think that is. And what would you say are differences that you've noticed in the clients that you work with that are athletes versus non-athletes, whether they're fighters or basketball players or whatever, just the athletes that you have versus non? Do you notice any differences, even just income aside, whether it's habits, whether it's things that you notice insight wise that maybe the general public does differently than athletes, or maybe things athletes need to worry about in a different way than regular clients that you have? Other than taking the same, I'm sure there's a lot of the same fundamentals and the same systems apply to everybody. Are there any specific differences there? Or is it pretty much, let's take this scheme and let's run it for whoever needs it?
Fighters or anyone who's earning money very inconsistently, that's its own sort of separate thing. So it's less so the type of work. Well, let me clarify. How often you're actually earning money is a huge differentiator. So they're different just because, and it's so funny because it's not even just how often, it's how much. The unpredictable, it's unpredictable for fighters how much they're going to earn, how often, and for everyone else, there's usually some sort of predictability with other clients that I work with. I'll say that fighters, I mean, UFC fighters who are at the highest level of fighting in the world, what I love about them is that they understand the importance of like having a team of experts. And that is refreshing because they are just like, look, I'm not an expert when it comes to the money stuff. I could spend the time to learn it, but I'll probably make a lot of mistakes along the way. Can you just help me with this? And they do the same thing. They've got a striking coach, a jujitsu coach, wrestling, nutritionist, a mindset. Like I love that about fighters. With, let's say, business owners, who's the other major sort of type of clients that I work with, they will. And there's pros and cons of both, but just being your specializing fighters yourself. I don't know if I answered your question, but those are some of the first differences that I recognize. Just the instant sort of like I need someone for this because I'm not an expert in it.
It's true. Yeah, I guess the willingness to take on others' advice, understanding that, like you said, you move forward kind of as a team. And I think with sports, whether you compete in a group sport, a team sport, or even an individual sport, there's team aspects to everything. There's going to be a team component where I think, I guess, in entrepreneurship and people in business, there's maybe more of this solo kind of element of I need to do this on my own. People aren't there to help me. I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing, which, even if it does work, you could expedite that process a lot. Yeah.
I was gonna say the other thing is, a lot of times the business owners will say to me, "I just don't want to have to worry about my money," and like because their income is coming in daily in many cases, and sometimes quite a lot. I mean, you're talking anywhere from 250K, 500K a year or more on a regular basis. They're earning money. They just want to have a system set up to not have to worry about it. And fighters also don't want to have to worry about their money, but they don't really have the luxury so much of being like so hands off with it because, again, like we've said, it's just so inconsistent.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good point. And it brings me to this question too, is that, I would kind of classify athletes, specifically fighters, into three different categories. And I'll work you through them kind of from bottom to top. And if you have a couple of tips kind of per each one, like per, each archetype of person, or things that you've seen firsthand, I think that would go a long way for people as well. Cause they typically fall into one of these three buckets. So I would say as a start, it's, getting to this place where you aren't able to make an income from sport full time, and you work some sort of a 9 to 5, whether it's a corporate job, whether it's teaching or whatever, and it's trying to do both. So it's like, how can I manage full-time work, trying to do full-time training, understanding that it's more of a long game? I'm not really going to make that much money at all from competing. A lot of my money is coming from my 9 to 5. Are there, for those types of people, are there things they can do so that their paycheck goes a bit of a longer way. Like if they're totally reliant on, an office job to fund all the training that they're doing, all the travel that they're doing, all the competing that they're doing, and you kind of feel like, well, I'm kind of stuck with this, regular paycheck that I'm getting. It's not as variable because I'm not, really making too much from competing. Are there things with that type of demographic, maybe earlier on, wanting to be, at that higher level of fighting, making most of their income from kind of a regular 9 to 5 job? Are there things that they can do just to build some quicker habits with that?
Yeah, I think it's probably important to clarify. I've talked about managing money. I think it's probably important to clarify the goal of managing money, and then we could sort of say how different levels of athletes can apply it. The only goal of managing money is to use your money in the smartest way possible to achieve your goals. So before anyone gets lost in, different budgets or ways to manage it or where to put it, just like remember that. Like if you are being smart with your money, boom, you're managing it. When it comes to fighter athletes who are starting to maybe earn a little bit of income, but their primary source of income is their job, this is probably going to be fairly consistent throughout in the beginning, which is you really just need to know how much it costs you to live every month. And it shouldn't take more than about half an hour to figure that out. Again, you can download these free templates, but I break down expenses into three main categories. All of your fixed and recurring expenses, that's your rent or mortgage, your bills, debt payments, subscriptions, everything that you pay for on a consistent basis pretty much comes out of your bank account the same amount, the same time every month. That goes in one column. So that's number one. Number two is your everyday needs that aren't recurring. So your food, gas, haircuts, personal care products, anything that you buy for your house or apartment. On average, you make an estimate for how much you need for the month, and the same for your fun money or your guilt-free spending. Adding those together tells you how much it costs you to live every month. And sometimes, even when it comes to nutrition or whatever, we look for more complicated solutions. We say it can't be that simple, but when it comes to managing money, that is one of the simplest things that nobody does is understand what it actually costs them to survive on this planet on a monthly basis. And when you do that, as you're trying to progress in your life, whether you're an athlete, it doesn't matter who you are, when you're just trying to level up your life, if you can put only exactly what you need to survive, including some fun money, you don't want to, you don't want to go crazy trying to not do anything. Putting that aside tells you exactly how much strategic money you have. That's the money that you're going to use to invest in gear, recovery, equipment, whatever it is that you need to get better, compete better, hire better coaches, experts. So I would say figure out how much it costs you to live and be smart with that strategic money and know that that's the accelerator. Money is an amazing tool, an amazing accelerator to help you achieve your goals faster.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good way of putting it. Yeah, and I haven't thought of that either. The next level to that too. So if kind of that entry level is having full-time work and using that money to, I guess, fund, your training and your goals in that sense, what I've seen too is the next level above that is having a little bit more flexibility to train because a lot of the income comes from something they're doing for themselves, whether it's personal training, it's nutrition. There's a lot of people that are like, well, I want to train full time. I want to spend all my time at the gym. How can I balance that if I don't have a 9 to 5? Let me do one-on-one sessions. Let me kind of do it myself that way. Now, for you, because I don't know anything about this, what do you think is better? I mean, even just if there's any tips for those types of people, but also is working with just kind of cash on hand, is that better for someone in that situation? Or are there opportunities to maybe come up with some sort of incorporation, use that as a way to write off parts of training? Like, again, not my specialty, but I think a lot of people are wondering those things as well. Is it better just to, hey, it's $50 for a session, let's just do cash, let me train you and do it that way? Or are there other ways that you can maybe expand on not just doing the basic level of it, but maybe thinking in more creative ways?
So two things come to mind. The first, and this brings me back to a mistake, is not tracking all of your business expenses. Anything that you could use to reduce your taxable income. So just because you're receiving X amount of dollars, and we're talking about as a contractor, so as an athlete competing, any and I'm not a CPA, so you check with a CPA, make sure that these are tax deductible expenses. But whatever income that you receive, tracking every single business expense means that it's that much less of a pot that you're going to be taxed on. So major thing to definitely do, and mistake to avoid. Uh, in terms of the sort of making money part, it's important to recognize that there are many ways to make lots and lots of money. And especially now, you could, and it takes time. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend this for someone who is really trying to become a professional athlete, because doing something on the side, which if you're doing something, if being an athlete is on the side of you working a regular job and you want to do something on the side from that to earn some extra money to fund the athlete stuff, like that could be complicated. But there are, I mean, if you're an expert or something that you would have loved to have known 2 years ago, you create a little, 30-page PDF and you sell it like that. That's an ebook. That's what people sell. That's infinitely scalable. And you post on it, and now you're sharing your own products. You're no longer an affiliate for some other, company or whatever. But, there's lots of different ways that you can make money. You can do affiliate stuff. I'm just thinking outside the box from privates, which, I mean, shoot, yeah, if you could charge $100 an hour for a private or private group sessions, yeah, for sure, do that. Or seminars. Yeah, do whatever you can. I mean, if you are trying to make it to the highest level, then it's like my old jiu-jitsu coach, Ryan Hall, said, you've got to be willing to live out of a cardboard box.
Yeah. It's true. I think scale is definitely like a hot topic word, and it makes sense, right? Instead of going 1-to-1, can you go, one to many, one to as many as you can, and make the most out of that 1 hour. And like you said, whether that scale comes from, instead of doing an individual session, doing a group session, or maybe creating some sort of educational tool that you can distribute, so now you're not just limited to your time, but you can, that can go globally and whatever. I think that's definitely a good way to look at it. And like you said, it's being creative. We're not necessarily saying do something that's totally out of your expertise, but it's like, how can you repackage what you're good at to make things just a little bit easier on you? And sometimes that goes a long way. So I have some questions for you that people sent in. I see, a couple of people joined as well. What's the difference between making more and spending less in terms of the impact that it has on me, as well as what's kind of easier to do? Some people say save as much as you can. Some people say you need to make more. Some people say you need to spend less. I guess they both get you towards the same thing, which is just more money to spend. But what's your take on that, which is, I guess, increasing your, possibility of income versus reducing your expenses? What's your take?
When you are I'm just thinking about like new fighters who are just giving everything that they possibly can to get into the UFC or Bellator or, whatever, organization it is. And they really want to just make a living and be the best, maybe be the number one, be a title holder. You just want to live on as little as you possibly can. For a regular person, to answer that question, I'd say you want to live a moderately healthy and peaceful lifestyle. So back to that cost of living, how much does it cost you to live every month? For a regular person, every day they're just going about their life and they want to grow and do things. But I'd say you don't want to reduce things so much that you are, terrible apartment, uncomfortable bed, and on the other end of it, you don't want to just blow your money on luxury, living lavishly. So find some middle ground. For anyone that is super ambitious, and the window, especially when it comes to athletes, where the window is dependent on your actual physical age and body, you can be scrappier. You can really try and reduce your expenses to that lowest amount that you can. And so it's not an either or, but it's an and. You do that, and you remind yourself that there are lots of people making boatloads of money, and that if you continue pushing and trying to be creative and just knowing that there are other opportunities out there for you, I would pursue both. I would think about both in those ways.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's not or, it's and you can do both at the same time. And I guess for some people, one is easier than the other, right? For some people, their capacity to make a little bit more might be easier than to save more if they're saving. For some people, vice versa. So I guess it starts with what you said before, which is just tracking. If you're not tracking this stuff, you have no idea which way to go at all.
I'll say something else too. So several years ago, I remember that I was not making very much money, and just thinking about different ways that I could reduce my expenses, and trying to be creative in ways like uh, finding more creative ways to reduce my expenses. Nowadays, I'm I'm smart about what I'm spending, but anytime something comes up where I might have previously thought, okay, how can I either make more or reduce my expenses? My mind now is always, how can I make more? And it's almost like a muscle that I've been exercising over the past few years. Wanted to get a nicer apartment. So rather than thinking to myself, how can I reduce my other living expenses? I'm thinking, no, no, no. How can I make more? Or a health medical expense came up last year for me. Nothing crazy, but something that I was not expecting. I'm thinking, how can I make more to cover this? Not how can I cut out? So there's a mental shift where if you just exercise that muscle and keep asking yourself, how can I make more? You might struggle for a while, but eventually you'll figure more things out.
Yeah.
And there's no limit to how much you can make, whereas there is, of course, a limit to how much you can cut.
It's true. Yeah, there's one way you can go infinitely up, but you can't go infinitely down. So I guess that it's a good way of looking at it too. Another question that just got sent in too is, do you have any tips for athletes that train abroad, outside of their home country and are looking for ways to kind of fund their career? Obviously, maybe this is more of an accounting question, kind of looking at global stuff. But have you either dealt with this or have any sort of insight towards this stuff? Is like, you're training abroad, you're not at your home country for an extended amount of time. Are there things that you can do to make a little bit of money to fund, the goals that you have?
It's a great question. I really don't know. I mean, I can. There are some things that come to mind, which are anything to do with the internet. It doesn't matter where you are. So if you can build an audience and then take on sponsorships, paid posts on your social media or affiliate links, uh, any sort of digital product that you can sell online, you can freelance through Upwork or Fiverr. Li- uh, psh, Literally anything. I mean, check out Alex Hormozzi's new book, $100 Million Leads. And social media is one way it's organic content, organically growing a business, but you can do cold email outreach. You can do lots of different ways to get customers and make money online. So again, this is just me rattling things off in my head, but yeah, I haven't dealt with that specifically.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good point too, is that is scalable. And also, it transcends, I guess, different time zones and area codes and stuff like that, as well as you're limited less. If you're just doing one-on-ones, I guess, at your gym, that 1 hour of your time is going to go to a very specific place and you can't do anything else with that. Whereas, doing stuff online gives you that kind of infinite scalability.
I will say though, I'll speak for myself when I say I've only recently started making money from social media, and I've been at it for about 3 years. So I guess it'll be different. Some people, I just was not naturally like into making content and that kind of thing. So maybe it took me a bit longer than it would take other people. Uh, but like, again, when I think about young athletes who are ideally all they're doing all day, every day is training or recovering, to take on another like sort of side thing where you're really trying to make something from it, something significant from it, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that unless you just are able to put in a little bit of time here or there and it be a longer term thing. Like if you've got a 3 year outlook, fine, put some time into it. But otherwise, yeah, I want to put that asterisk there. Like that's not the easiest way to start making money on the side. The easiest way would be to be local, do the privates, do the group sessions, whatever it might be at, where you are.
Yep. Yep. No, it's a good point. Another question that came in as well is saving enough on its own, or do you need to be actively investing in something? I know now, at least here, like, interest rates keep going up. People talk about inflation all the time. You see all this content about, money not being worth the same in a few years from now if you just park it in a savings account. Again, not my area of expertise, maybe yours. Is saving enough, or should you proactively be investing in something?
Well, you'll never get rich saving just by the simple fact that money does lose value every year due to inflation. And when it comes to now, granted, I'm a huge advocate, like save to invest. So just you can put money aside until you come across opportunities to invest in yourself. So this would be separate from like the stock market or real estate or anything like that. But when you can level up your skills and then generate a better income because of it, like that's a great way to save for a purpose that you will later invest in yourself. Again, for athletes, that means if you can, remember, we've got your income, your cost of living, and then everything else is strategic money. If you can save some of that into a specific account and hire, let's say, someone like you, Dylan, who is now they're leveling up their mindset, and they're going to have a better chance of winning their next fight. That increases their income. They can hire other experts that are going to help them make more money, or hire cross train and pay that, use that money for travel to go somewhere else. Like, they're saving to invest in yourself is one of the fastest ways that you can start leveling up your income. But yeah, to be clear, you will never get rich or wealthy just by saving. You have to invest in some way, whether it's investing in yourself or in other more traditional assets.
Yeah, it reminds me. You referenced Hormozy before, and what's he say? He says you have the S&P 500 or the S&Me 500, and it's
Yep.
true, right? It's like, if you, let's say you're a fighter in the UFC, and you invest in nutritionist and mental coaching, and you cross train, and maybe you bring in some new training partners, but then if you win the fight and you get fight of the night performance bonus, that money just scaled in a way that it would have taken years and years in the market or whatever. So it's true. I think it's important to look at it through that lens also, as it's like investing doesn't just mean put it in stocks and wait, a long period of time. It's like, what can I do actively right now that can make an immediate impact, and not just an immediate impact, but maybe one that has, a greater impact on me right away and down the line.
I come from a stock market sort of background. Like, I became interested in the stock market when I was 18. So this is over a decade ago. And I learned about it. I spent some time at a hedge fund for a couple summers. And so I fundamentally understand it. Even I, though, am not by no means, I don't buy and sell individual stocks. But what I am a big fan of is the S&P 500. Even having like knowing, like, real estate is not my area of expertise at all. Like, I understand the stock market and I've had experience with it for many years. Even with that as a preface, the S&P is going to give you, can I curse on here, or
Yeah.
S&P is going to give you shit returns if you've got next to no income to invest in it. So 100%, if you are not making very much money, and on average, the S&P 500 returns maybe 8 to 10% a year. That's a long-term average, but that's nothing on $1,000, $5,000 here or there. Like, that is not going to get you the life that you want to live if you're trying to become great. It's a little for a long time is one potential avenue, but if you can reinvest in yourself, level up your skill set, and make more, then start pouring money into the S&P 500 or some of the more traditional asset classes, that's a much better strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense too. And I think explaining it that way is good to hear, especially from someone like you that, does this as your specialty. I think we hear so much stuff. We're just exposed to so much. I know if I pull up my Instagram feed, I'm going to see just a whole bunch of these podcasts and TED Talks and people giving their take. And, a lot of the time they're similar, a lot of the time they're different. And it's hard to figure out like who's saying the right thing. Right. So is there a component as well of like, there might not be one specific blueprint to follow, but it's more important to figure out what's right for you. Like, whether it is real estate or the market or in yourself, like everybody has their own spin on it. Is it important to do some kind of self-reflecting and say, there's a ton of options out there, I need to figure out which one I associate most with? Or would you say there is like a clear cut winner as to, the first thing that you can do to start to make that impact?
There's principles, and then there's how you're applying those principles. So if we talk about just a couple basic financial principles, money, not doing anything, sitting in a savings account. Granted, there are some savings accounts that earn a little bit of money, but generally speaking, cash loses value every year. So that's the first. Meaning, if you are not doing something with that money, you're going to be able to buy less and less every single year. Then there is it's sort of I don't know if you want to call it a short or long time horizon, the last like 50, 100 years or so. The stock market, meaning the S&P 500, which is a collection of 500 of some of the largest, most profitable companies in the United States, and you can buy access to all of them through something called an ETF or a mutual fund with one purchase. You go and this is a ticker symbol, a little abbreviation. There's a share price. If you've got $1,000 to invest and a share price is $400, you can buy 2 shares at $800, and that'll grow about 8 to 10% a year. And you can keep doing that over the long term if you want. That being said, and then there's real estate. Not that you can't do both, but oftentimes when people look at investing, they really look at the stock market, real estate, and business, small business or growing your own business. There are other ways to look at it too, but those are 3 of the major camps. With all that said, again, back to principles, the S&P 500 is just like, it's so easy now to invest in. I mean, you literally make one purchase and you do nothing. I mean, there is nothing closer to like just easily getting, I hate to use the phrase passive. It's not really income, but it's passive gain. There's almost nothing easier. So you might consider, if you don't think you can get a greater than an 8 to 10% return on what you're doing with your money, then cool. Yeah. Put it in the S&P or put something like again, fundamentally you're asking, who's right, who's wrong, who should you listen to, what should you do? I'd understand rates of growth in some basic fashion, even just what we're talking about. Inflation, you're going to lose roughly 2% every year, sometimes more. The S&P 500 is going to grow 8 to 10% every year on average. So if you think you can do more with, let's say, $1,000, if you think you can earn more than $80 to $100 using that $1,000 yourself, do that. When it comes to deciding what to do with it, avoid anything that is going to promise to earn you a whole lot of money within 6 months. I mean, seriously, if you're going to get really great at something, it's going to take longer than 6 months. You might, so avoid day trading, avoid almost anything to do with crypto. Not that you couldn't do long-term stuff with crypto, but anything super short-term, day trading, the crypto hype, drop shipping. These are all things that in theory you could make money with, but the people that are selling it are making way more off you and the courses that they're selling than they're actually doing with the thing that you're trying to learn.
Yeah, that's a good. I get all these less now. But I used to get all those spam forex DMs all the time too. But that's a good point. Is like you're those people, and it's almost like taking your advice. Investing in themselves. Those people are making more money off of the courses that they sell on drop shipping for the most part than from the thing itself. So I guess sometimes in a less scammy way, you have to ask yourself too, how can I take this and make the most with it? If me taking that $100 and buying a new pair of shin pads or whatever is going to allow me to train better, and that could be the answer. It doesn't always have to be the traditional approach too, which is cool.
I will say though, because I mentioned courses, there are some really, really great courses. You can find a really great course for $250 or less. If someone's charging $1,000, $2,000 for a course, and you're just sort of at the beginning of stages and not really sure what to be, what skill or skill sets you want to learn, I would avoid those bigger ticket courses. And you want to vet the person a little bit. Just pay attention to their content, whatever they're putting out for a little while. But there are, when you think about how to level up your life and the skill set that you're trying to acquire to increase your income, the single fastest way to do that is to get someone who already has those skills and who's already doing that to teach you. Short of hire, which is the most expensive way, to actually hire someone one-on-one for their time. Short of that, you're looking at any course or free material that they put out. Maybe it's YouTube. Maybe it's maybe it's a book that they wrote and you can go get it at the library. Again, though, if you just look at someone teaching you, someone who's an expert or already accomplished what you wanted to accomplish, you can hire them directly. You can consume their free content. You can buy their courses and you can buy their courses or books. But I think too often people separate courses almost as like a separate thing. And it's, and not that you were doing this, Dylan, but people thinking all courses are bad, when in reality, it's like, okay, if you can hire the person that is going to teach you, cool. If you can't, buy their course, which is a compilation of videos and scripts and templates and everything that they can everything they have to teach you what you want to learn.
Yeah. 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 No, it makes sense. It's more efficient access, right? Especially if, the best possible outcome would be to hire them and it's just not feasible. What other content do they have that, cost a fraction of being able to hire them one-on-one, consume some of that content. And it also gives you a good sense of like, what's this all about? Did this help? If it helps, maybe there's more steps you can take. If it didn't help, you're not out too much because of it. But when you do a little bit
Exactly.
more of that research, you can trust yourself to make those decisions. And, I think our gut will tell us a lot of the time, is this, a little bit more scammy than it should be. You see those ads pop up sometimes and you just get a sense for it where, like you said, really the majority of people that have content out there, it's really genuine, it's authentic, and it's meant to make a difference and usually does, which is cool.
Mhm.
The other question I have, one of the last ones here that somebody sent in is what are some mistakes that you see, on a consistent basis from people that are coming to you a little bit later than they should, that someone
Mm.
getting started in this now, could benefit from right away. So maybe, some mistakes you see that build up over time that if you said, man, if I was working with you 5 years ago, we totally could have spun this around. Like, what are some things that, a younger athlete can do, or a younger person, or someone who's just, wants to be more proactive about this instead of, having any sort of consequences later? What are some of those mistakes you see later on that could actually be corrected today for some of these people?
Yeah, great question. My first few clients were all in their like early to mid 30s, and they had been fighting for anywhere from 5 to 7 years or something like that, depending on their age. So they all pretty much said the same thing, which is like, I should have done this years ago. The mistakes that they made: one, not setting aside money for taxes in a separate savings account. So getting caught up with back taxes is miserable because you're just in the hole. It's a debt. So you want to proactively set aside money for taxes. If you check out this video that I posted about managing a UFC fighter's income, you'll see that you want to put aside taxes as a percentage of your um, we'll call it like your your pre-tax income. So it's everything that you earn minus what you pay your managers and coaches and the other associated fees with that fight. Then take, maybe it's 25% is a good starting number. Take 25% of that, set it in a savings account just for taxes. And then the other side of it is, it's just more general. And I think I mentioned it before, but actually just sitting down and managing your money, or at the very least deciding what to do with it. Managing money has sort of three key components: deciding what to do with it, ensuring that you stick to your decisions, and tracking it in some sort of simple and efficient way. Not tracking expenses, but right, we can talk about that if you want. So if you're even only doing the first component, deciding what to do with it, that means you write down on a piece of paper or on a little spreadsheet what you're earning, what you expect to be spending, and how you want to use that money. That is, you're going to be miles ahead of everyone else when it comes to your finances if you just do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And I think too, those are the most important questions. I think anytime I talk to somebody that's a specialist is like, again, what are those things? Because of course you see people that come in and unfortunately, I'm sure, in your case as well, people probably come to you not for the best reasons. It's like they need to scramble. It's like, okay, I'm in a bad place. Maybe you were saying the back tax thing. I owe all this. What should I do? And it's like, okay, let's build that foundation first. It's the same with training. It's like you don't take a fight with no fight experience and then rush to a coach and say, all right,
Mm.
teach me how to compete. You learn how to do it, and then when you're ready, you go out there and you take those next steps. And I think that's probably something you notice as well, as a lot of people come maybe later than they should, whether it's a few months later after something significant happens, or it's years later after these bad habits have kind of snowballed into something bigger. And, I'm sure it's easier to kind of get that message across, which is like, deal with this stuff now because you don't want the stresses of this stuff down the line. And, as stressful as it might be to save aside money to invest or to hire, somebody like you, or to, do some of these courses and these classes, it is nothing compared to the stress that you face when you either owe something down the line or just a result of the habits that you should have built that you didn't. I think the stress is not even comparable to. So I'm sure that's also a message that you have, is like, do this stuff now, because if you wait till you stress about it, it's a lot tougher.
And something else that I'll add is, it can be intimidating to manage large sums of money. So when you have to literally transfer thousands of dollars at a time, even if it's just moving money from a checking to a savings account, and you're moving 8K, something like, or 15K, you're paying your manager a percentage. Staring at a large sum of money in front of you and putting thousands of dollars in these different sort of areas can be intimidating. So another benefit of starting early is you just start to build that familiarity with moving money around and deciding what to do with it, so that when you do get to those higher amounts, it's not from zero to massive amounts. It's incrementally getting better and more familiar with it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. And you referenced before too some of the stuff that you have available, whether it's templates, things that people can download just to get started. Like what are some of those resources that you have that people can get started with right away, and where can they be found? Because I think it's something that everybody should explore a little bit.
Yeah, I want to put out so much more for free. I am just not. It's just going to take me more time. But for now, I put the most comprehensive financial dashboard together that I could, as simple as possible. And there's a YouTube video that you can watch to fill everything out. Uh, Otherwise, I try and post some helpful stuff on my social media, my TikTok or my Instagram. But apart from that, I mean, shoot, there are people that are way better at like the business side of things than I am, or like the investing side of things. And if people have specific questions, like one person that comes to mind about the stock market is Jeremy Schneider, Personal Finance Club. Never talked to the guy, have no affiliation with him, but he's arguably one of the best personal finance people on Instagram. So if you want to learn about money, like he's got tons of educational stuff, talks about investing in the market and other stuff. But yeah, just consume, apart from my stuff, find people that seem to kind of know what they're talking about, try their things out. And I guess that's all I can really say on that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, man. No, you know what? I appreciate you coming on. Like I said at the beginning, the whole purpose for me here is just, I think building a community where people can hear from, others that they might not have had access to or not known how to reach. Because, whether you're an athlete or not, as an individual, we're dealing with so many things at the same time, whether it's personal things, whether it's finance things, whether it's diet, nutrition, health. Like, life is so multifaceted. I think the more perspectives you can hear from, the better. And, you coming in, talking now, and this will be shared, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that reach out afterwards with some questions too. Like, you coming in and dropping some insights goes a long way. And I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on, talk to the people we have here, have it shared, and have some more people watch and have them learn a little bit more about you. And if they were able to take one thing away, I mean, that's usually the goal, right? If there's one thing that you can take away from this that makes you think, like, yeah, that was a good point, or I didn't think about that before, or I did wonder that as well. I just didn't know the first step I could take. Now I have some sort of direction. Things like this, if there's one thing you can take, it's extremely worth it. And if you have more than one thing, even better. So I think there's a lot more than one gem that you dropped today. And I'm really appreciative of you coming on.
For sure. I appreciate you having me. I love what you are doing, and kind of the frame that you had mentioned, just trying to help out your community with more experts. And I look forward to seeing who else you bring on.
Of course, perfect. Well, thank you so much. Definitely, I'll check out as well some of the resources that you have. Keep following those TikTok videos. Like I said, they're educational, but they're also kind of fun to watch, and I think those are hard to come by these days. So check out Chris on TikTok and Instagram if you haven't done that yet for some more videos and clips and education. And yeah, thanks so much. And I look forward to having a chance to look into this content more, having some more questions for you that people share, and just kind of taking it one day at a time.
That sounds good. Thanks, Dylan.